Hi, everybody. I'm actually recording this in post because there was some problems with my recording software. Once or twice, you're going to hear my voice cut off, and I apologize for that, but there's no way for me to get the audio back. So I am sorry, but I do think that this is still a pretty good episode, so give it a listen. Yes, I'm so professional. Haha. No, I'm not. I'm just doing this in my spare time, so I'm sorry about my voice being cut off, but let's forget that and jump right into Final Fantasy Tactics Advance and Advance A2 on the GBA. See ya. Hello, everybody. This is Video Game Growing Pains, and we're back to talk about the GBA Final Fantasy game. Right now, I'm going to be talking about Final Fantasy Advance and Final Fantasy Advance AU, Grimoire of the Rift. These games are true sequels to Final Fantasy Tactics. Not exactly direct sequels like Final Fantasy X and X-2 were, but they keep the spirit of the game same. They have an isometric view down where you can watch your characters play out actions and move them, and they have a robust job system with a few special job classes. In many ways, I'd actually say that the job system benefits a lot more from Final Fantasy Tactics Advance than it did from Final Fantasy Tactics. Final Fantasy Tactics had a lot of very specialized job classes that, well, meant you didn't use a lot of the basic jobs a lot. Here it's the reverse. They only give you the specialized classes if you prove your mastery with the regular ones, because the specialized characters are all incredibly late game. Anyway, the graphic style is beautiful. It's a mix of the colorful sprite-based style that we've seen in Final Fantasy Tactics before, with a somewhat simplified palette to account for the GBA. Overall, it's a gorgeous game, and the advent of the races in the world of Final Fantasy Tactics, Ivalice, makes it a little bit more robust, because you now have a lot of different minor stat changes and boosts, and some job specialities given to races. I would say that at times it becomes a little too complicated, though. For example, there's a very strong comboing system in the game that I could just never master. It came down to trying to combo jobs together and combo special finishers together, and I just couldn't do it. I didn't have a lot of chances to try because the only time you could do it is if you had stars. You only got stars from defeating opponents, so you really couldn't do this practice mode. Very frustrating at times. Anyway, what is the story here? Well, Final Fantasy Tactics Advance features several characters who are in your normal grade school in the town of St. Ivalice. They get sucked into a mystical world, the Ivalice that we know of, and Marsh, the hero, has to become the leader of a group of mercenaries to try and find his friends and find his way home. Along the way, things start to become a bit different. One of his friends is revealed to be the prince of the land, and it's his fault that laws are being enacted which restrict the mercenaries' goals. We'll talk more about laws in a minute. He meets some of his other friends, and most of them actually don't want to go back. They're happier there. Some of them because of the way their hair changes, some of them because of physical abnormalities which are fixed. It's actually a very good look at how the grass is always greener, and a lot of them don't want to go home, even if it's just a world of dreams and delusions. It's kind of poignant, really. The music in the game is excellent. Not Nobuo Uematsu excellent, but still quite up to snuff. It's almost as good, if not as good, as regular Final Fantasy Tactics. Now, like I said, this is a much more robust version of Final Fantasy Tactics with a lot more, I wouldn't say a lot more, but several different job classes that you can pick from. However, unfortunately, there are two big detriments that make people a little hesitant to play this game. The first one is the heavy mission emphasis. What I mean by this is, in the original Final Fantasy Tactics, you had an option to send your characters out on missions to try and get them to get money or discover locations, and this was cool as a side thing. This is the main part of Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. You take on missions, some story-based, some not, and that's how you basically move the quest along. And while you don't have to do all 300 missions, there are rewards for doing that, and it's an OCD player's nightmare. There's not really a linear progression to the stories. There is some that get unlocked the more you work at it, but it's a little frustrating because the stories move very slow. I will say this, though. The game offers a lot of real incentives to keep going. Each of your races, for example, Numo, Bunga, Moogle, Human, have avatars that act like summons. And the more you play in the game, the more you unlock, and these summons are, once again, used with the stars that you get for defeating players. This is in many ways probably the game's most interesting system, the star system and the law system. The law system is actually one of the bigger detriments of the game, not because it's bad, but because it kind of makes players a little unhappy.
The system of the game works like this. When you start a battle, a judge appears, and the judge declares certain actions forbidden and certain actions penalized. Now, if you do a penalty action, you have a chance of being arrested, but also of losing stats. You'll get a yellow card. If you do a red action, your character will be forced to leave from the screen. Most of the time, the computer will obey the rules, so they won't have to worry about this. So you actually have to make a choice as a player and decide if the law is worth breaking. It can be a little frustrating because the laws sometimes seem random and can be very, very restrictive to the point where it's a little not fun to play. But it does offer an interesting counterpoint with the stars system. Now, I keep coming back to the stars because you get points for knocking out characters. When you are fighting a judge, you're safe from death. If your character gets knocked out, they're knocked out and they revive later at the end of the battle. There are certain areas in the game called yogs. If you go to a yogd, there is no judge, there are no laws, but if you die there and aren't revived by the end of the battle or by the end of the timer, you die for good. This can be a real interesting twist because missions in the yogd are much more dangerous. Overall, I found the game to be remarkably charming, and while it can be a bit of a slog, and there are problems with the mission system, which I will get to, I found the game to be very engrossing. The story touched on a lot of different elements of human nature, and as you progress, more laws get added to ramp up the challenge. Now, alongside the story, the gameplay is very fun. The job system works very well here, and you have a lot of different jobs to support each other. Nothing truly new. In fact, I think they might have actually taken jobs out. But the differences in races offers enough different synergy and different
That the game is, well, true to its name, a tactics game. Now, like I said, it's a bit of an OCD player's nightmare because of how frustrating getting all of the missions done are, and some missions require prerequisite materials. You can only hold a certain number of materials, and some missions are not redoable. Some are, but many are not. So if you throw out the wrong material, you can be left hunting and scavenging and trying to find someone to trade materials with for ages. And yes, it does have link support. Overall, Final Fantasy Tactics Advance is a game I went back to several times as a child. I used to have a tradition of playing it through to the end every time I went to the beach when I was younger. It's a fun little game and probably the best of the Tactics Advance games. There was one other sequel to Tactics Advance and a spin off game. This was Final Fantasy Tactics Advance A2, Grimoire of the Rift. It's tangentially connected to the main series because, well, you're still in St. Ivalice when you start and you go to a strange world, and one of the characters from the previous game comes back. You are the character Luso, who finds his way into Ivalice again. The judge system is still here. However, judges basically are treasure keepers. Instead of taking you out of the battle if you lose, you just lose some extra treasure, which is less penalizing, but at the same time it also screws with OCD players. There's a new race in A2 based on Final Fantasy XII Revenant Rings. I believe, Eagle? They're the winged warriors of the sky. The winged warriors are actually great because they give you a lot of variety and
a lot of choice with how to move. They are able to move over certain enemies and the characters. I find the game much less compelling, though, mostly because the story
remarkably weak. You've got far fewer characters to pull from, and generally the mission system just wears on you. It's a bit frustrating if I'm being honest. A2 isn't a bad game. The sprites are very similar. The graphics are quite competent. The gameplay is fun. It's the same with a small bit of advancement from the Final Fantasy Tactics Advance game. And the music is still pretty good, but the story is just really weak. Luso doesn't really have a reason to want to go home, and the characters he meets don't really get into a big boss battle. In fact, one of the characters who's been fighting you and hounding you through the game, they just come in and it's like, yep, I'm the final boss. I'm like, what? Really? I mean, yeah, you get sort of a big, bossy kind of enemy to fight, but it just comes straight out of nowhere. It's really weird and annoying. Anyway, I don't like it that much. There is one more game worth mentioning in the Final Fantasy Tactics Advance series, and that is Final Fantasy Crystal Defenders. Not much to say about this. It's a tower defense game that uses the Final Fantasy characters and classes, and some monsters as well. It's okay. It's not great as far as TD goes, but it's okay. It could be worse. It came out on the Wii as WiiWare in two separate installments. there's not really enough levels for me to want to play it that much, and there's not really a lot to it. It's just a standard run-of-the-mill tower defense game. Kind of a bit of a waste when you think about it. Anyway, that is the Final Fantasy games for the GBA. Final Fantasy Tactics Advance is a great cult classic. It's an amazing sequel to Final Fantasy Tactics, which fixes some of the problems and introduces some new and interesting dynamics. Final Fantasy Tactics 2, A2 Grimoire of the Rift, it's okay. I wouldn't seek it out. It's not really a classic, but it's okay. You can do worse. Crystal Defenders, it's not bad, but honestly, there's no real point. It's just a basic TD. Now, we talked about GBA. Let's move on to GameCube. Oh, God, help us all. Next time, we talk about Final Fantasy Tactics Crystal Chronicles. Oh, screw it. Not Tactics Crystal Chronicles. You know what I mean. Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles. Anyway, video game growing pains signing out. Later.